Hey guys, and welcome to SOMA. SOMA is a game that came out the end of September last year, and I kind of put off doing a review for it for a while. Mostly because I just was putting off doing reviews for a while. I'll get my, full discretion out of the way. I'm taking a look at it with a review code I received from a third-party PR firm, so I don't know anybody at Frictional, so I don't have any sort of biases or anything, but I did not pay for the game, so my opinions come from that's where my biases lie. Anyway, it's by, like as I said, Frictional Games. They're the developers of Amnesia: The Dark Descent, but not A Machine for Pigs. That was someone else. And they also did Penumbra. And reviewing SOMA is tough because that's one of the reasons I put it off for so long. Normally, I like to just sit down, start up the game, play through the first hour or so, then do a video where I show off the first 20-30 minutes of the game while I talk about my impressions of things. Unfortunately, that won't really work for SOMA, so I'm gonna kind of do this video in two parts. It'll be one video, but the way it's gonna do is I'm gonna do a general overview of the game first, and I'll just play some footage in the background. I'm actually not playing the game right now as I talk, and then afterwards I'm gonna go over my kind of in-depth thoughts of the game, which is going to be chock full of spoilers. So if you're the kind of person that gets, your knickers in a twist over spoilers, I'll let you know when, and you can back down from the rest of the video. So ripped right from the description of the game on Steam, SOMA is a first-person sci-fi horror game about identity, consciousness, and what it means to be human. You play as a man named Simon, who after a brain scan to begin treatment for his brain problems that stem from a car crash he was in, he awakens in a far-flung future in an underwater facility. That's like the basic gist of the game. There's a bunch of other sci-fi ideas that are thrown in there that, and honestly, in their own right, could each be their own thing, and they bleed together well enough, I feel. As far as the game, there's basically two parts of the game. You're either in a facility or you're underwater, and even though you're technically in both, whatever. There's a handful of facilities that Simon has to travel through, and you need to solve some sort of puzzle to get through them. Usually, it boils down to find the MacGuffin, bring it back to the door so that it opens it. And all the while, you need to not get caught up by whatever horrible cyber monsters lurking around the area. The underwater parts are more like transitionary areas between the different facilities, where Simon needs to move from, facility A to facility B, or theta to gamma. And it transitions pretty well between the facilities and underwaters. And then, to the new facility and then back outside and then to the next facility over and over again. All while you figure out how to, open the new doors and not get the bad touch from the spooky cyber monsters. Along the way, Simon and I guess you, the player, you kind of uncover what happened in the years Simon has skipped between his brain scan and waking up in the facility. And you learn a lot about the different characters that work there as you're zipping through, and you see what their work in the facility was. It does this through audio logs that you'll see someone, you can get their last moments, or you'll see little devices on the wall and you can get a recording out of it. It's never really explained why Simon can do this, why he just gets audio playbacks fed directly into his head, but that's how they decide to deliver the backstory, is through audio logs. As a game alone, SOMA's alright. The engine has some flaws, which allow for some really interesting glitches, but is otherwise a serviceable spookfest of a dim first-person kind of puzzler. But where the game really shines, however, is its narrative. Before I get into that, there's one thing I want to put forth, and this is a rule I've kind of always held, that if someone can get a full experience of your game while watching someone else play it, you don't have a good game. A good game is one that I can watch someone else play and then be compelled to play myself. SOMA is, by this metric, not a good game. You can easily get everything you want out of SOMA just watching someone else go through it. All you're really missing is the tension of getting the jump scare from the monster around the corner, or that's chasing you, and I guess you also miss the frustration of maybe not being able to find the whatever object opens the door, and you have some kind of trouble proceeding until you finally find it. Because as a game, that's all there is you just move from area to area to area to area, well, from area to water to area to water to area to water, there's monsters around, and there's doors that you end up needing to go into the monster den to find the piece for. And that's it. As a vessel for narrative, however, SOMA has some stuff to offer there. Does this mean I think you shouldn't buy SOMA? No, I just think you need to be fully aware of what you're getting into before you spend your hard-earned money on a game that, while a great sci-fi game, would be better served in another medium like a short story or a film, perhaps. The monster chases kind of come off as incredibly gamey in a bad way. Kind of like it's forcing itself to remind you that you're playing a video game and not just watching a movie or reading the book. The puzzles are all either just like pull the right lever, push the right button, or find the thing to turn on the lever or button. Kind of pointless hindrances so the game can exposit and dump narrative on you at the pre-designated pace. And the problem I have is that I want to dislike it for this, but it does the narrative bit so well that I can't. It's got such a well-delivered story for a sci-fi horror game that, and the protagonist is so good that I can't fault the game for hardly being a game, because that's not what it sets out to be. It just wants to be an interactive movie where you're just involved enough to feel something, and it accomplishes that really well. So this is where I'm going to start to talk about the plot and stuff. So while I think you can only appreciate a good work while looking at the narrative in depth, and spoiling the story only serves to make it better in 99% of cases, and I believe that this is definitely the case with SOMA, if you're the kind of person who gets riled up about being spoiled on something, this is where you should consider backing out. I can't really tell you a whole lot more about SOMA without spoiling the story and giving away what makes it so interesting and really great. If you are staying, get comfortable. I'm going to run through basically the whole story from here on out. You can see the annotation that's up here on the video. If you want to skip to my summary of thoughts at the end of the video, go ahead and do that. And then you won't hear me ruin the surprise of the plot for you. So the crux of SOMA's narrative is this theme of identity. Simon wakes up far in the future after going in for his little brain scan, and you find out surprisingly quickly that this isn't the big twist of the story that Simon is a robot. No, he gets told almost right away that his mind has been downloaded in a robot body. I mean, there's some small nitpicky details that make him, sound mind in a sound body, and it's not entirely the same as everything else, but for all intents and purposes, he's in a robot body. He's just a robot with a man's memories, up until he got a brain scan. He doesn't remember anything of his past life after the brain scan, and he finds out he totally lived a full life after his brain scan. Or, I don't know if it was a full life, but he lived a life that he now does not. The Simon you are playing, the vessel for the player Simon, you don't remember. You don't know anything about it. So it's really weird. There's also Catherine, who specializes in the robot with human mind tech that the future has developed, and she's now in the same situation as you. She only remembers anything up until the point where she brain scanned herself and nothing after, and she's now just a mind in Simon's door opening tool. But Simon is a character I really like, mostly because I hate him. He's an ignorant dumbass, but it's for a really good reason, and it's written pretty well. He's this fish out of water under the sea, and this frightens him so much that he just can't actually wrap his head around the details of what's going on to him. At first, he denies being a robot, despite having seen a handful of other robots who also insist they're human when he tells them they're not. And then pretty quickly, I think the next time it's brought up, he's like, yeah, you know what? I thought about it. You're right. It doesn't make sense that I can travel underwater without having to breathe, and that my hands are very obviously robot hands. You're probably right. I'm a human and a robot. I'll figure out something to do about it. I'm just going to not think about it and not freak out. And it's a really interesting, it subverts all your expectations, because you expect that to be the twist of the story that comes at the end, and it's not. You get it right at the beginning. And you expect him to spend all story denying it until you get a twist that is a big reveal that yes, you are a robot. Or at least leave it open-ended at the end where you have to think, is he a robot? Was he a robot? Was he human? No, they just give it to you right out. You're a robot, and he accepts it pretty quickly. The biggest example of Simon's ineptitude with this whole concept, though, it comes with these two times in the story where he has to change bodies. To do this, Catherine says, okay, I'm going to scan your brain up to this point, which will have all your memories up to the brain scan, nothing of old Simon's life, you waking up in the facility up until I do the brain scan the second time, and then you'll be in a new body. Sounds great. Okay, I've already had it happen. What can go wrong, he says. And you find out that a large majority of people getting scanned into the Ark, which is this kind of matrix-like computer that they're just going to shoot off into space to be the last vestige of humanity, is like minds, because that's all that's left after the Earth is cometed to death. They're suddenly faced with this identity crisis that you get through these backstory audio logs, where now there's two of me, the one whose brain is in the computer rocket and the one who's trapped underwater on a dying planet. And it doesn't sit well with them, and they end up coming to terms with things, and the only way they can reconcile this is decide that the only way they can live on is to die. If I kill my human self right after being scanned, they seem to think, then the only me is the one on the Ark me, and I live there forever without any sort of paradox. And Simon, he hears about this stuff. We're given the impression that Simon hears the audio logs we're hearing as the player. And he's faced with this exact same situation. He has to have his brain scanned, downloaded in a new body so he can get past whatever obstacle and progress through the game. And Catherine explains to him that they're going to do this. She outlines how it's going to work. I'm going to scan your brain. You're going to remember everything before you woke up here and everything you did here, but you're going to be in a new body. And he's like, yeah, okay, if that's what you say I got to do, I'll do it. And then they do it, and he freaks out because he hears his voice come from the old body, who is thinking that it didn't work because he's still in the same body and he's still in the same place. He's like, shouldn't I be in the other? And so she turns it off. Or like pauses him or something. And the Simon you now play as, because you've switched to the new body Simon, he loses it because he can't come to terms with the idea that he exists from a single point onwards, the second brain scan, as two separate Simons now. The one that he is, if you can call it being, and the one that he's sitting in front of, who just thought that it didn't work. One consciousness wins this coin flip and is in the new body, and one loses it and needs to be put down now because it's the wrong Simon. Even though it's the original, technically, it's this really difficult thing to reconcile, because you need to be the new one, but the old one's there, and then that somehow means you're not the real one because you're a copy. And how do you live with that? Like, how do you mentally come to terms with that? And the best part is at the end of the game, it has to happen again, and Simon still doesn't get it again. This time, we as the player, we stay with this perspective of the Simon who lost the flip, and he realizes that he just has to rot underwater as the last consciousness on the planet, alone forever, and it's this really scary thought that completely shatters him. And I don't blame him. On the other hand, I hate Simon for being this dunce, this idiot, because he doesn't understand this very simple concept that is explained to him multiple times, and he sees going on with everybody else around him. But on the other, he's dealing with concepts like decades and decades ahead of him in a time he doesn't understand, in a place he doesn't get, and you can kind of empathize with this struggle and this fear that he ends up coming off as incredibly human for a guy who's a memory of a human in a robot. And the game presents you with these incredibly dark situations where you manipulate these minds in these other robots. And this is what I was getting at with my gripes over player agency earlier, kind of, is you as a player, you don't really make any large change on the narrative. You do get attached to Simon, but you don't decide whether or not he succeeds in his journey and launches the Ark into space, except by continuing to play SOMA or by stopping playing it. What you do decide is these little pieces of moral choice that aren't all black or white. Do you kill or inflict suffering on the robots that think they're human to proceed? Is it okay to torture someone's mind if it's just an electronic backup of one? Does it make it real and somehow okay if you do that? And while your choices don't really impact anything, you have to actually turn on someone and inflict traumatic shock on them to get a password, only for them to not remember it the next time you try. And there's this weird feeling that you have to reconcile with yourself as the player between the lesser of these two psychopathic evils in order to progress, that you can't get in another medium because you don't do it in another medium. You have to pull the plug on all these people who are technically alive, but only on the absolute strictest sense of the word, this like barely life support, and they've been alive for longer than their lifespan should even allow them, and they're clearly suffering because of it. But you're still killing them. And the game keeps presenting you with these situations to the point where it's almost watered down and loses its impact. But it makes you question where you stand on concepts like the border between life and self and what it means to really be alive, and if a simulacrum can exist alongside itself or not. Do you kill the adorable, helpful, but otherwise brainless robot in order to proceed? Or do you go and kill the one that thinks it's human and screams out in pain as you shock it to death so that you can get the part to move on? Can a robot with no nervous system be tortured with excruciating pain just because it thinks it's taking pain when it has no nervous system to feel it? Do you delete the brain scan of yourself that was used so that in case you fail, no other you needs to experience the end of the world? And is it alright to wake up a brain scan of someone else just to get them a password and turn them off, functionally killing them just because you're done with them multiple times until you get it right and actually get the password, but then you just leave them there, off, forever? Do you pull the plug on someone that, for all intents and purposes, is you, except that his last 5 seconds or so are a little different because he lost this coin flip and didn't get into a new body? That's it. That's SOMA. It's a series of kinda horrors and barely puzzles that fill out this philosophical quandary of an identity and consciousness crisis, and whether or not you're a monster for going through with the whole thing. It does what it does well, and I think it's something that's worth experiencing. The audio logs are kind of pointless, but mostly I think I'm just sick of audio logs in first-person games as a means of delivering backstory. The puzzles are just surface-level filler. The monsters are non-threatening frights that exist within a boundary that you can just walk away from. The morality quandaries are interesting, but its lack of overall impact on the narrative and the fact that sometimes you just feel nothing when you know they want you to feel something ultimately keeps a lot of them from really mattering. It's not as good as a philosophical or moralistic debate as it wants to be, and it's not a so spooky horror game that it markets itself as. It's certainly not a puzzler either. It's great, and I liked it a lot because it elicits this emotional response through play. But if all you want is a horror game in a sci-fi setting, you're probably going to be disappointed. If you're at all interested in the themes and ideas it brings up, however, you'll probably walk away feeling really good about the game. Or like a psychopathic asshole, but I digress. I like SOMA a lot, and I encourage you to give it a try yourself.